my the most exciting sessions, because the partnerships are so critical to the building of SAVE. So our success depends in great part on the number and quality of partnerships that we forge with groups that share our vision. We believe strongly that the value of partnership is not 1 + 1 is 2. Partnerships are a force multiplier that enables us to draw from a wider range of resources and reach broader audiences than we could possibly do on our own. What's also noteworthy about partnerships is that they can be formed amongst organizations that are not only in the same industry. So that's what we're going to be discussing today. And today's panel will be demonstrating the value that comes from both kinds of relationships. So I want to introduce our panelists. First of all, Joe Way. Yay. So Joe is the Executive Director of Digital Spaces here at UCLA, and he has helped foster SAVE's relationship with HETMA, or Higher Education Technology Managers Alliance, whose board of director he chairs. It's a 501c3 advocacy organization focused on growing the influence and elevating the profile of higher education audiovisual, the audiovisual, which is huge in higher education, as most of us know. HETMA is a natural partner to SAVE. So also I wanted to share with you that when we first launched SAVE, this was back in, I think, May of 2022, before we were actually officially launched, I met Joe at a trade show. And one of our manufacturers had found out about SAVE, and they introduced me to Joe, and Joe was immediately like, let's meet. And within 3 weeks, he had his whole board of directors approve becoming a partner to us. And then after that, he took his whole AV department from his previous employer through the SAVE certification program, and he's planning to do the same here at UCLA. So it's been a very, very important partnership.
Which I want to stop. Are we recording? Do I need a mic? And so to go on with that, higher education, as you can see, as you've been here the last couple days, we do things in scale. And that was one of the things that we recognized early on, was the fact that we can have an impact not just as onesies, twosies, but in hundredsies, right? And then you take that with, the 750 institutions that are members of HETMA, with, then hundreds of classrooms at each of those institutions, and what that really means. And that was why it was important for us to be able to bring, at my former institution, USC, fight on, where we went through the certification program. And I have one from my team in the back who went through the certification workshop yesterday. Was that not, it changed every way you thought about it, didn't it? And so we know that the power of this relationship is huge to HETMA. So.
Okay, next, thank you, Joe. Next, I want to introduce Susan Angus. Sue has devoted 50 years of her life to volunteer service, all independent of government programs. She assumed the mantle of Executive Director for the Commission on Voluntary Service in Action, or CVSA, in 1984 as a full-time professional volunteer. Prior to that, Susan was a volunteer organizer with some of the groups listed in Invest Yourself. She's got one, CVSA's catalog on volunteer opportunities. Susan was active with self-help organizations of farm workers and service workers fighting for better living and working conditions, access to health care, and legal justice. And CVSA was formed back in 1945, directly after World War II, independent really, really young people will, oh, you founded CVSA. Anyway, Susan has steered CVSA to remain independent of failed government programs. She's led CVSA to give a larger voice and influence to organizations that represent people and communities in need of systemic solutions to life and death, economic, social, and environmental problems. And I wanted to also just say how formidable the partnership between SAVE and CVSA is. I actually am on the executive committee of CVSA, and it was through CVSA that I learned about the Sustainable Development Goals. I actually attended the UN conference that takes place every July on sustainable development, and brought that back to my company and my staff. And when people found out about them, they said, well, we've got to have a plan. And that was the genesis of SAVE. And she's been an advisor, a mentor. And so it's a very, very significant partnership that we have. So the next I want to introduce Debbie Williamson. Debbie is SAVE co-chair of Partnerships and Alliances. She's also a charter member of the SAVE Board of Directors, and she's the CEO of Tempest Technologies, based in Seattle. And Debbie signed on when we first formed the committee to build SAVE, prior to even officially launching SAVE. Debbie's company, Tempest Technologies, was the first company to become SAVE certified. And she has brought tremendous resources and her passion, her experiences to SAVE. And Debbie has made this her kind of her next chapter. So thank you. What do I want to do when I grow up? Okay, so I'm going to start with you, Sue. Speaking from the perspective of bringing the goals to your member organizations, and being the organization that has official consultative status at the UN, and bringing back the educational campaign here in the United States, I wanted you to speak to that.
Okay, thank you. Is this on? This is on. Okay. My suggestion in the workshop yesterday was chalkboard and loud voice. So thank you, and we're very excited to be here, and I'm actually here with a little grouping of volunteers who are part of CVSA. Phyllis Kornblum also. Indu is our CVSA SAVE liaison. So we're very excited about this historic conference. What you're doing is monumental. We'll have many, many ripples, many ramifications, and I hope that this also inspires you all to think about other ways that you're going to be able to volunteer with others towards the achievement of the 2030 Sustainable Development Goals in our country here in the U.S. and also around the world. I want to actually start with reading you something very short. But I don't know if you're familiar with the fact that the goals, that those icons and those list of goals are actually part of a 35-page document. It's called Transforming Our World, the Agenda for the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. It's worth reading. And the preamble has the following paragraph. It is we, the peoples, who are embarking today on the road to 2030. Our journey will involve governments as well as parliaments, the UN system, and other international institutions, local authorities, indigenous peoples, civil society, business and the private sector, the scientific and academic community, and all people. Millions have already engaged with and will own this agenda. It is an agenda of the people, by the people, and for the people, and this we believe will ensure its success. That's in the preamble. And it is true, we watched the whole process of writing the goals. It was a 5-year process. It was born out of the 2012 Earth Summit in Rio de Janeiro. And literally millions of people were involved in writing this agenda and deciding on these goals. And I can talk for hours about that, and I won't now. Stop me. But so you see, it really is up to us to make this happen. And that's what it was intended for from the beginning. And I want to emphasize also that the 17 goals of the entire agenda, it starts with zero poverty, ending all poverty in all its forms everywhere. It goes on to talk about zero hunger, i.e. we need sustainable agricultural systems. It talks about clean energy. It talks about clean, affordable water. We were talking in our workshop the other day about how many cities in the U.S. every year, thousands of families have their water shut off in the U.S. because they're 2 months behind on their water bill. Climate action, which is dovetailed with the 2015 Paris Accord. And it's about sustainable cities and so on. So it interconnects all of these things because they're inseparable. We can't deal with e-waste if we don't also talk about healthcare and poverty and good wages, good jobs, the entire thing. They're all interconnected. So it also deals with the fact that business owners, community leaders, students, all educators, all stakeholders have to be involved in the process. Well, who pulls all that together? The document says the government's supposed to. It starts with forming a council. It starts with bringing it to Parliament or Congress in our case. It starts with somebody being appointed in the government to form these committees and start planning meetings. Well, most of you know that hasn't happened in the US. Nada. And that's why it really is up to us to build that groundswell. And of course, none of us can do it alone, so we really do need each other. And I want to underscore the urgency, which I think we've gotten that message clearly from this conference. The presentation yesterday by the gentleman from UNIDO, when he talked about how we are producing and consuming as though there are 3 Earths. I mean, that's just like horrifying, because who's doing all that producing and consuming is actually a minority of the people on this Earth. It's mostly the global North that's doing all the consuming. And so as that division happens, why do we have so much conflict in the world? This is all connected. So I do want to underscore the urgency, and that we have been, whenever we speak at college classrooms, church groups, we talk to the nonprofit, community-based organizations, community gardens, we'll talk to anybody. We always call upon everyone to not only look at what they can do in their office or with their organization, of what they can do to be more aligned with the goals, stop using plastic and all of that. Start there. But to also look beyond your companies, beyond your business, beyond your office, beyond your industry. You are members of communities. You live somewhere. You are probably associated with other organizations or faith-based groups, or have an alumni school, or have kids who go to school. So consider how you can play a role in building even more partnerships, and we have to become really a force to contend with, demanding that the SDGs be fully implemented in the US. But to do it also in cooperation with the rest of the world. And I heard this in one of the workshop I was in yesterday. People were very good at thinking, if we do this here in the US, how does that affect other countries? And that's critically important. So we're building collective strength, but we do, as we do it, have to think about how can we keep the government accountable to. They're the ones that promised. They voted yes at that big conference in September 2015. The U.S. said they were one of the 193 countries that said we have to do this, and then the next day, not even an article in the New York Times. Nothing. But when you go to the UN or go to a G7 meeting or a G20 meeting or Davos, the U.S. will be there saying, we are all for the SDGs. domestically and globally. They talk like they're doing it. So we have to keep them accountable. Therefore, what is it that's missing that you can be looking at, okay? There's been no public education about the SDGs. There's some colleges that are now starting to teach it, but there's no public education. There's no billboards, there's no advertisements on TV, there's no news articles, not even about amazing things that other countries are doing towards achieving them. It's not there. It's not been brought to Congress. There's no politician that when they are running for office, do they speak about it? Do they say, and if you elect me, I'm going to do the SDGs? Okay, so that's all absent, right? Public service announcements, TV, radio, et cetera. So, plus the US is the only developed, economically developed, wealthy country that's brought no reports to the UN about what they've started to do to achieve it. Almost all of the other 193 countries. Out of the 193 countries, there's only 5 that have brought no reports. Yemen, which is war-torn and impoverished. South Sudan, war-torn and impoverished. Myanmar, war-torn and impoverished. Haiti, very war-torn and very impoverished. And the US is the only country that's brought no report. So that's what we at CVSA endeavored to try and turn around, and we are all volunteer. And we started this campaign. And we started it with one speaking engagement at a time. And so that's the other reason we're very excited about this conference, because we can see it getting out there. We can see the influence, and the energy and the power that this has. If you're wondering why hasn't the U.S. done it, volunteers often ask us, well, why not? Let's write to President. What's his name? Biden. Sorry, I was going to say Obama, then I was going to say Bush. Then I was like, which one are we on now? Okay, right. Whoever they are, let's write to them. Well, you could try that. But don't forget, in the U.S. in particular, there's very powerful financial interests that have really have the final word on matters of policy. And you can see it in the demography of our Congress. Where does the money come from that puts them into office? Oil, pharmaceuticals, insurance, et cetera, the big banking, et cetera. So you have to keep that in mind, because our job is to build that groundswell to change that. That's really what we're up against. So this is a little beyond the scope of just dealing with the industry, but that really, we're calling on people like you, for you to be thinking in those terms and looking at who else can you partner with in your community or through your industry or jumping industries or with educational institutions to really expand the scope of, for these goals to happen. Yes, there is all of these things you can do in your industry that you're talking about and need to be done and are very powerful, because as someone said in the session just earlier, people are watching other industries. So
Sue, I'm going to come back to you, but
okay.
It's a really good segue into why HETMA and why Joe Way feels very strongly about the partnership between SAVE and HETMA, and some of the initiatives that SAVE has launched and how that applies to higher education, such as our SAVE certification program and Save a Second Life.
Yeah, a little bit of a story. I'll just take 1 minute here. I remember when I left from Cal Baptist to USC, and I toured our classrooms that really needed a lot of work. And those of you who come on the tour later are going to find out we need a lot of work here too. It was interesting. This is the before shot you're going to see today. I was on a tour with our vice chancellor. No, I wasn't a chancellor. It's not a chancellor at USC, but anyway, our vice president. And Mandeep was walking me through our spaces, and we had this just monster of a lectern and wall box of stuff. And he said something, and I don't even think to this day he knows how impactful his one random statement was. And it was, does it really take all this equipment just to put a PowerPoint up on that screen? Right? And it was just in passing, but it stuck with me. I was like, that's literally all we're doing. Someone's standing here, plugging in a laptop, and putting something up on that screen. And yet, our bill of materials is 15 rack units worth of crap, right? It's, the amplifiers and this and that. And it's like, you're right. That's literally all we're doing. And I said, there has to be a better way. And that's what started the push to go, how can we do this? How can we change? If really the end goal is just get something there and get something to someone out in the world through, and that's a cloud application with Zoom. There's got to be a way. And that was one of the things that started our journey at USC to design our spaces. And we were very proud that our classrooms ended up being 2 rack units. That's it. And by that, I then went, after we were done, and I just pulled the specs of all the equipment that used to be our standard and the equipment that was our new standard. And just looking at the power consumption of it being on, we saved 75% worth of power, just with it just sitting on. Not to then mention that we add things like occupancy sensors, where we make sure the classrooms turn off after not being left on all night. And you start to go, now take just the stuff, and then you take good practices and how impactful that is in one classroom. Now do that across the 300 that were under my scope, and now you're making real change, right? In just a small way. And I guarantee you no one in the university knew or cared, but I did, right? And that's where, now coming around to when we met, and it became it was an important issue to me. And HETMA, we know that we can do things, again, in our individual institutions, we do things at scale. But then if you figure there's 5,300 higher education institutions in the United States, with each an average of 200 classrooms at each one of them. And then you start looking at, that becomes exponential impact, right? And when I met Christina and she told me about this, and this was already something important to me, which is why I ran to getting SAVE certified for my team. And I know it was early on. I think we were the ones right after you to go through it. And we were a little bit guinea pigs, right? What it's going to look like and how we're going to go through it. But that's okay. Because I knew that if we can do that, and we can now take the power of one school and take an organization like HETMA that now impacts hundreds of schools, and which is now what we're getting to, this Train the Trainer program, where we can now take this and take those skills and take it off of your hands and give those good practices to others, and be able to, again, let that be exponential. It's crazy that you think higher education, wow, we're going to have an education program. Who would have ever thought? And I think that's really what drove it to it. And so to say, hey, we know that we can start there, and we have the youth that come to our campus and that matters to them. And now if we can train that early, just imagine what we can do, right? And then there becomes the second side of it, where we at USC, we ripped out all kinds of, still the pictures to this day are scary of the room of just junk that we ripped out, right? Yes, Crestron's very happy. I know that makes its rounds, the picture of the old equipment. But the thing is, now what are you going to do with it? We were able to pass some of it on to another institution, Cal Baptist. We were able to pass some of it on to the high school across the street. We were able to now go, and we didn't know about Save a Second Life at this time. We just thought, we standardize. There's some good stuff here that's still, it's usable. We don't necessarily need to e-waste it. And little did we know, we were being part of Save a Second Life without knowing that program even existed. And we went, wow. That's the same thing in higher ed. How much, and I know integrators, you want to sell us all this new stuff, but the fact is, there is opportunities. There are impoverished schools. You look at inner city schools here in LA that will never, ever get funding to put new stuff in. And so us wealthy ones like at UCLA, and what we'll do, now, don't we have a duty to pass on what's usable. Sure, maybe it's not leading edge, but it's not just hey, we're not throwing it in a landfill like we all learned in the training, but you're doing social good, right? And isn't that a deeper impact you can have? And that's what was important for us. And so taking my personal story now when I brought that to HETMA, and you already said, it took all of about 8 minutes to put this to a vote and say, we're going to create an official partnership because we recognize that impact we can have. And this is really where I was happy about this conference, and why I said, when we first had the conversation, let's do a conference. I got a place. I can do this. Is because now we can establish that as best practices for our industry, and we know the power that higher education has to influence the AV industry, and hopefully that's where our relationship can continue to grow. And I'm hoping after this conference that we do end up with those powerful leaders that say, we're going to take this to the next step. So there we go.
Awesome, Joe. So thank you so much for all those incredible insights. So I want to now ask Debbie to share her story about her company becoming SAFE certified, and the successful partnerships have been formed subsequent to going through SAFE certified.
Well, first let me start by saying I want to acknowledge Sue's early adoption and on trying to take action, bringing to light, recognizing that nothing was being done. You brought that to Christina, and Christina trusted you and could see the vision, and she stopped and said, we can do better. She's the reason, these two ladies are the reason why we're all here today. Joe for supporting it early on and giving it wings and breadth, because without the support, we all wouldn't be here today. I think it's clear that partnerships and alliances are the cornerstone to how we're really going to make change. And when Christina approached me early on, I was like, the only thing that resonated with me, I didn't know anything about the SDGs. And she led in with goal number 12. Well, that was something I could relate to. I had no idea what I was getting into with everything else. But there's a gentleman sitting in the audience today, Andrew Berklid, that used to work for my company, and he brought to us a gentleman, Simon Sinek, and our company went through a whole process about why and having purpose. What's our purpose? And we're all here to make money. It's important for us to be a profitable organizations, or whatever our goal is in our organization, and we're all from different walks. But every day, if you get up and you have purpose, life is better, and we can make change quickly together. And said, do you want to become involved in this organization? We're going to do this certification. And I'm like, okay, well, what does that entail? And at that time, it was a 2-day process. And I'm like, okay, I'm going to stop my company for 2 days. Better be good, better be worthwhile. So I started learning about the SDGs, and I said, okay, yes, we'll make that commitment. So Christina and Twee came into our office, and we had a 2-day workshop that was so powerful. Just the educational process, and seeing, like you guys have been experiencing over the last couple of days, there's so much there. And I don't have time to stop and go and look for all of that. I knew I wanted to do better. I knew I wanted to do things differently. And in some respects, I thought that I was responsibly recycling, thought, we were involved in community activities. And so I was feeling pretty good about where we were at. And then when I started scratching the surface and peeling the layers of the onion back, I wasn't really doing it right at all. I wasn't vetting my partnerships. I wasn't connecting with the right individuals so that I could really make a larger impact. So in the process of going through the workshop and identifying the goals that we wanted to support, and hopefully all of you guys will take what you learned in the workshop and take it back to your organizations and really get this groundswell going. And we're here to help you. We're in it together. You guys are here for a reason. You trusted somebody, they said this is important. Now you are understanding on a deeper level what you can do. And it's going to take partners to help us grow this. It's going to take partners to help us sustain this and scale it. So part of my job is to go out now and help find those partnerships, working with organizations like CVSA, so I can give the individuals in my company who want to step up a place to go and have impact. So we've gone out and canvassed with Western Farm Workers Association, several of the organizations. I've been to Chicago, Orange County, Portland, and it's so impactful to go out into the community and really start to learn. In one day, you can change lives. They have no idea. You have no, and it's an afternoon. So I said, well, how am I going to be able to scale this in my company? So we started giving volunteer time off. They can go to a CVSA organization. So my guys got very inspired. They saw a need when they went out there. They were working with all this old gear. Well, we've got all this old gear. What are we doing with it? You know, it's part of our big problem. So now we're installing systems in the organizations to help them communicate better, provide farther reach in the community, give them better access. They're going back and doing more canvassing. We're involved with our local community food bank. We've donated. Last year, I think we donated 250 turkeys. You know, it's just, you start to see a ripple. And the thing that scared me about becoming involved in SAVE, it's like, I'm busy, I'm running a company, I don't know what to do. How do I make a start, right? So now I'm helping to create these